At one point in time in my corporate career, I realized something. The job was great, the pay was very well, but still I felt completely empty. Not because the job was bad, but because the job and all the hours I spent only served one purpose: profit. And that was not enough for me. If you ever felt the same way, this video is for you. Today I'm going to give you the honest comparison: corporate world versus international organizations. The salary reality, the culture, the progression, the frustration, both sides. Let's get into it. My name is Leah. I have worked in consulting at EY, at Fujitsu, in management at a German engineering company, at the Air Force, and now I'm almost for 4 years a UN officer. So I have really seen both sides. Before we get into salaries and benefits, and trust me, they will surprise you, I want to start with something more important, because I think most people ask the wrong question. They ask, which one pays more? Which one has better benefits? Which one looks better on my CV? The question that actually matters first is what you need your work to mean. What should be the meaning of your work? Okay, let's get into the comparison. In the private sector, especially in well-run companies and consulting, the work is intellectually stimulating, fast-paced and well-rewarded. But the ultimate purpose of almost everything is profit. That is not a criticism, it is just a fact, and for a lot of people that is completely fine. For me it wasn't anymore. I had left a role where purpose was built into the work itself, and stepping into a corporate world where only measure of success was revenue felt like something was missing. I could not name it for a long time. Eventually I could. If you feel something similar, not just I want more money, but I want to do something that matters to the world beyond balance sheets, then the international organizations world is worth considering seriously. Now, let's talk about money. If you are from Germany, Switzerland, the UK or the US, country with competitive salaries, the UN may not represent a dramatic step up from the home pay, especially at an entry or mid-level. The private sector in these countries pays well. UN pays very well as well, but it's not a dramatically step up. However, for me, it was a step up. I had a very good offer in Germany as well, and UN could match it or even a little bit overmatch it. But if you are from Spain, Italy, Eastern countries, some Asian or African countries, many people really go there also for the money, because it is a significant step up, even on a local position. I have, for example, many friends from Spain and Italy, and even a local position which does not pay as much as a P position offers a way higher salary than the local salaries. And if you manage to secure a P salary, then you can end up with getting 2 to 4 times the pay that you would get in your home country. So that's really worth considering. You get a higher salary without moving by taking a local position, and an even higher salary if you consider relocating and taking a P position. That's great. Let us talk about your work-life balance now. One thing that surprised me when I moved from consulting to the UN is the pressure is definitely lower. Also, especially considering that you get on a mid-career level at UN already a salary that can compete with a management and director level in the private sector, even in Germany. And the pressure on this kind of management level that I had before is way higher. So you get a really good pay for comparably low pressure and low stress. I want to be careful how I say this, because it varies really by agency and role. The gap between responsibility and compensation is better than in the corporate world. Culture and environment. Most international organizations are very diverse, because they are diverse by definition, right? It's an international organization. Whereas I experienced at the private sector different things. Now, if you work for a big company who has multiple offices all over the world, like I used to, definitely the working language is also English, and you work together with multiple nations. But it's not comparable with UN. I work with between 50 and 60 different nationalities together, and diversity is lived there every day. And then the reputation and the image, if you care about something like this. If I say I work for the UN, I usually get a wow. I've not experienced that in the past. Almost everywhere in the world, it carries a specific kind of recognition, and that very few private sector companies have, maybe unless you work for Google. Now we also need to have a look at the disadvantages. What I experienced as a negative factor at the UN is the career progression. Whereas in the private sector, usually you have a specific career path, especially in consulting. So if you perform well, you're going to be promoted. Or in a private sector company, if you deliver very good work, maybe they create a position for you or they promote you in your own position. So I was used to be promoted and develop constantly. But at the UN, I'm now almost 4 years at the same position. And that's very normal. I have friends, colleagues being like more than 10 years at the same position. It is very, very difficult to progress from one position to another one, and you always will need to apply to the higher position, and promotions are very, very rare. So the best way to get promoted, to develop, is actually to move from one UN agency to another UN agency, which is of course a big administrative effort because you will always need to apply to a new organization and prove yourself again. And that's something which I see as a disadvantage because I am very career driven. If that's not important for you, maybe it doesn't matter, especially because specific levels at the UN are already that good. It doesn't necessarily requires you to progress faster and higher. Then there is another negative point, rotation. So in the private sector, of course, it's possible that sometimes you really relocate from one position, from one place to another place because you want to have a promotion or you're moving the companies, you're changing the companies. I did that several times, but you're not forced to do that. At UN, some agencies still have rotation. So that means after being, for example, 3, 4, or 5 years in one position, they rotate you to another position, to another location. And there's nothing that you can do about it. So if you don't like it and if you want to stay at the same location, you need to resign, or you need to take a local position because only P higher category positions are affected from this rotation. And I see the advantages about that, right? So they want you to get a more general profile, to see another location, to experience another position, which is really interesting for your development. However, there are some specific specialist fields. And if you rotate into a new position where you have zero experience, that's usually quite difficult, and also quite difficult for the people working in this position who actually have the experience, because they will work with someone who has zero experience and they will need to do all the work. So it's something I really don't like, but luckily not all UN agencies have rotation anymore. And then the bureaucracy and pace. The UN moves slowly and processes take ages. So if you are used to work in a fast-paced, agile environment, you might struggle there. I did too. Because if you want to get things done, if you want to influence things, but everything goes like multiple cycles over weeks and over months, and nothing is going to change because everything is connected to some policies that need to be in place, this can get quite frustrating. And then another topic is the personal development. I was used in the private sector to get a lot of training certificates paid by the organization. Now, this doesn't count for every UN agency, but most have really continuously budget issues. There's never enough money. And certificates are rarely paid by the UN organizations. So you need to focus on personal development on your own and might also need to pay one or other certificate on your own, because the UN is also not very innovative sometimes. Again, we cannot generalize, depends on the agency, but most of them are pretty old school. So you definitely need to do some development on your own, especially if after a couple of years you're planning to go back to the private sector. You will struggle if you don't prepare yourself for that. However, if you want to stay in the international world forever, which many people want because the work is great, the atmosphere is diverse, the pay is great, the reputation is great, then it might not matter. If you feel something similar, not just I want more money, but I want what I do to matter to the world, then the international organization world is something that you should seriously consider, because that's certainly something that most private sector companies do not offer. So who should actually consider leaving the private sector for a UN or an international career? If you want to have work that has purpose beyond profit, if you are from a country where the UN salary represents a significant step up, which is true for most countries of the world, if you value stability, exceptional benefits, and a diverse international environment more than rapid progression and fast-paced agility, and if you are willing to invest in your own professional development independently rather than relying on your employer to do it for you. And who should probably stay in the private sector? People who need rapid career progression, people who are thriving in high-pressure, fast-pacing, fast-moving environments, people who come from high-income countries where UN doesn't mean a significant salary increase, and anyone who cannot tolerate bureaucracy, because it is real and it's going to frustrate you a lot. Would I do it again? Would I leave the corporate world again for the UN or any other international organization? Definitely I would. Do I want to go back to the private sector? For now, not. So for me, the advantages are more than the disadvantages. If you like my content and want to support this channel, please subscribe and see you next week.